Mark Carney spoke to Cochrane from the CBC, sat around for a long time talking about all of the things he's already been saying and how it can wait. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. I think somewhere the Liberal Party ran a poll on people's impression of Mark Carney, and the numbers didn't come back in his favor. After the King said the speech that was written for him by the Liberal Party, Mark Carney took 20 minutes to sit down with the CBC. And of course, they did a lot of talk about how they were both going to be very busy near the end of the conversation. However, it's still a 20-minute interview, and there's only one real reason to do a 20-minute interview. That's because you're trying to reinforce your base. That's because you're trying to get the message out that you think people are not hearing. I believe that Mark Carney is just so out of touch that he doesn't realize that people are living it. They don't need to hear it. And only a very select few of the citizenry that unfortunately vote in larger numbers is who he's actually talking to. And the rest of the country is done waiting. They've been told to be patient from the Liberal Party since 2017. And then there was, oh, don't worry, it's all going to rebound after COVID. And people are just sick of it. They're looking around their lives. Their debts are through the roof. They're claiming bankruptcy. They're looking at eviction. They're looking at selling their houses at a loss of big, big money. And they just want action. Of course, Mark Carney seems to think that if he sits down with the CBC for 20 minutes, everything is going to be okay. And I'm sure that they're going to try to convince themselves that that interview went really well. They touched on every subject, and I want to start with Trump because I feel that Trump was the one that he campaigned on strongest, and Trump seems to be the one that he's ignoring the fastest. So let's have a listen to his newfangled position on this situation with the United States and his dealings and interactions with the President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Okay, but so do you agree with the Mexican economy minister, I think, said today, end of September is when CUSMA starts. Is that the period between now and then that you think you can have this resolved with the United States?
I have a slightly different view. I didn't see the specific comments, but the actual CUSMA review period starts in 2026. So
he still talks about getting the auto sector. The president does. He still has the tariffs against the auto sector and talks about making it economically unviable to make cars in Canada and to move it to the United States. So the economic threat still persists.
One of the issues for the United States and by extension for Canada is, can the U.S. auto sector be viable and truly competitive versus Asian competition, particularly coming Chinese competition, but broader global competition? Can it be viable if it's just an American auto sector, a U.S. auto sector? The answer is no.
Already we are confronted by Mark Carney's lack of political experience and his naivete in believing that treaties are the same as contracts. They are not, and they will never be the same. We can see right out of that statement that Mark Carney has absolutely no idea what he's doing. He believes that because he said, oh no, this market's not going to be able to work if the U.S. does it all by themselves, that you'll believe that. What he overlooks is that the only people that are really listening to that are the people that are working in the industry, and everybody else is just worried about how they can get something to eat. Their primary concern is the food prices that are skyrocketing and the lack of affordable housing. The auto sector being destroyed or moving all the way out of Canada and into the United States is not going to impact the productivity of the auto sector at all. There's no difference. It's not like the cars we were making in Canada are because we have a special deal with a different country. Anything that is being manufactured in Canada can be manufactured in the United States, and the same will happen. So if those cars were going to a foreign market, they will continue to go to that market. And if those cars were simply feeding the domestic market of the United States, which it predominantly was, then they will continue to feed the domestic market of the United States. And Mark Carney, for all of his net zero, is going to have to let those cars come back into Canada tax-free, because otherwise the Canadian population is going to be looking at him as not keeping one of his campaign promises as to lower costs. But he wants you to just take his word for it because he doesn't really understand. He's way over his head, guys. He's in way over his head.
We look to Europe, we look to Asia, we look to new partners that we're going to deepen with. And that's a big element of what we're laying out in the speech. Since I became Prime Minister, is a number of conversations of increasing specificity with our major European partners so that we become defense partners with them, that we become part of a very big build-out of their defense industrial base, which will have big benefits for jobs here in Canada. We're making great progress on that, and by Canada Day, we'd like to see something concrete there.
Donald Trump keeps talking about how he's going to have this, that, and the other thing done by the 4th of July. And that's why you hear Mark Carney keep talking about Canada Day, because in his head, you're not listening to the American press and you're not watching what Donald Trump is saying. Unfortunately for him, nobody cares about the date of it because nothing is going to change by the 1st of July. He's not going to have any deals in place with the EU. The EU, Donald Trump got wind of it and he said, fine, 50% tariff on all of your cars. Let's think about what that means. That means Mercedes. That means a lot of Volkswagen. That means a lot of BMW. You believe for 1 second that the EU is going to be able to take on those companies? And they're going to make a deal with Donald Trump any second now. As for Mark Carney saying that we're going to be fleshing out the industrial military base in Europe because they're all on a big push to amp up their military, that's just not going to happen. First of all, we don't even have our own military amped up. And secondly, in Europe, they're very territorial. They like French materials to be made in France. They like Norwegian things to be made in Norway. They like German things to be made in Germany, and so on and so forth. They're not all of a sudden going to be telling themselves that they're going to buy Canadian steel because they can get all of the precious things that they can get out of Canada from Ukraine. They already have, a lot of them already have deals. From 2 years ago, they were giving Ukraine money and Ukraine was letting them have all of their precious metals and rare earth metals and all of that. So I don't know what he says that they're making progress. I don't know any of that. That doesn't make any sense to me, but I can say for sure that there's not going to be anything of substance coming out of it. There's not going to be anything that's going to change the economy of Canada.
To $840 a year for a two-income family. So real money for people delivered on July 1st.
But I want to ask specifically about housing. And now, I know you said you don't want to force down the price of existing houses. You want to reduce the cost, increase the affordability of new builds, but the GST cut at the front end, driving down development fees to make it more affordable while driving up wages. So buying power, it makes it easier to own a home.
Yeah.
So like a simple measure of that is the price to income ratio. Yeah. And over the last 20 years, that has just gotten impossibly unbearable in a lot of big markets. Like 20 years ago in Toronto, it was 5 to 6 times an average salary. Now it's like 11 to 12. Yeah. What sort of a ratio are you aiming for with this policy? What's an affordability standard for
it comes back into it comes into several things. Now you've asked a very complicated question and you've layered it down, and the bottom line is for Canadians, can I get a mortgage? Can I afford the mortgage payments and I can buy the house? Part of what's shifted is the length of those mortgages and the cost of those mortgages. So there's multiple factors that have to happen here. One is we've got to get take-home pay up for Canadians. The first easiest way to do that is to cut taxes now. We're cutting that middle-class tax cut. That's why that's the first thing we're doing. Cut taxes on first-time home buyers, younger Canadians. They're buying a new home, saving up to $50,000. In fact, in some markets, Toronto would be an example, more than $50,000 off the price of a home. That's all, the big money, obviously. Then we need to get supply up in order to get that. At the same time, and we have a very ambitious plan, you'll see that roll out more into the fall setting of Parliament for that to roll out.
You heard him say it. It's $800 for a two-income family. That's like $17 a week for two incomes. So we're talking about $8.50, meaning you get to buy, I guess, the extra large coffee. It's not going to be enough to go into a bank and say, can I have a mortgage now? And if you could, what difference will it make? The houses are way out of reach for most people. So his solution to that is to give people to have a larger take-home pay. Larger take-home pay means your company has to pay you more. Means, of course, that everything that you have to buy costs more. That's what's known as inflation. We all know that inflation makes the wealthy very wealthy, but it doesn't make the poor live a better standard of living. And that's what we need to be discussing, standard of living. The only way we're going to improve the standard of living is to lower the cost of housing. Now, Mark Carney says he has an ambitious plan for that, but he'll be rolling that out in the fall. not now. So he says to you that it's a crisis, that it's an emergency. Vote for me. I'm going to be fixing Donald Trump, and I'm going to be fixing housing, and I'm going to be fixing the economy. Then you give him your vote. He flies around Europe and visits all like a playboy. And then when the Parliament finally sits, he says, oh, well, you know what? It's all going to be in the fall. Imagine at time of recording, it's May. So that's going to end in a couple of weeks. And so we talk about June, July, August, September, deep into September before Parliament sits again. And then he'll be like, okay, well, let's get started. So now we're talking October, November. So you're giving up, let's just leave aside the insult of the tax return. You're giving up an entire building season so that you can sit around, so that you can tell yourself that you're going to introduce a plan 4 or 5 months from now in the dead of winter. How is that a crisis in your mind that you're trying to address? Or are you just ignoring the crisis? Pick, because there's no way in the world you can be trying to convince me that you're doing both. And Canadians are smarter than that. They see that you're not going to be doing both. Nobody starts a housing project to build houses in November. Nobody does that, or October. So you're giving up the entire building season of 2025 and doing absolutely nothing and expecting Canadians to believe that you're doing something and that you feel it's a crisis and Donald Trump is an existential threat to our country. And I hear again the words of Donald Trump. Never say never. By the time we get to December, there will be people in this country begging Donald Trump to come up.
We are in a crisis. We have to get moving. We have to get moving on these major projects. We got to move, but the idea that, I'm not saying you suggested that we can just snap our fingers and all of a sudden housing in this country, a housing crisis will be solved overnight. No, that's not going to happen.
And here we are, we're right back to it, right out of his own mouth. On the one hand, he says, oh no, we got to move, but we can't snap our fingers. So the best thing to do is to just take the next 4 or 5 months off. So in March, I became the leader of the Liberal Party, and I didn't lift a finger on any of the problems that are plaguing this country. Then I told you all it was a terrible thing. It's a crisis. Vote for me because I'm good in a crisis. And now what I'm going to do is wait for 4 more months. We can all sit around and tell ourselves that it's all Trump's fault while the economy tanks and while people have no place to live and while the standard of living drops to record lows. But it's a crisis, and I'm just not going to do anything about it. It's essentially what he says, or at least not right away.
What we're going to do is fast track the approval, truly fast track the approval of those projects. And we are going to name specific projects to which these fast track approvals apply, so that the country can get moving. Now, part of what we're going to do collectively, in effect, we're going to have a competition with projects. Some projects are good ideas, but they're not ready. Others are ready, but they're bad ideas. We designate the ones we collectively want to move forward. And when I say we very much include Indigenous partners.
Fast track is such a vague term. It means nothing. What I want him to say is, I'm going to approve these deals within 90 days. That's the kind of thing you need to hear out of the government, because that's too vague, right? Oh, well, yeah, we fast tracked it. We only took 4 years instead of 5. That's insulting. Oh, and some ideas are ready, but they're not good ideas. It's an idea that's ready. You're not the judge. You're the one that's put there to help the people. You're not the one to put there. You're not the king, bud. You're not the guy who says, this is what we're doing because we're doing it. You're the guy who says, let me implement what it is the people want. That's your job, not the other way around. We don't serve you. You serve us. And as for including the First Nations peoples, I think that you need to include the Conservatives as well, because there are well over 40% of this country is conservative. So move over, give some room to the Conservatives, as well as giving some room to the First Nations. Then we'll see if we can get these things done. Of course, all we have to do is wait till the fall session in 4 months because of this emergency. That's not really an emergency or a crisis. It's just a slogan that I'm using so that you'll be scared of the monster in the closet and I won't have to actually lift a finger.
But freedom is something you earn every day.
Well, there you have it. Prime Minister of Canada, democratically elected Mark Carney, has said that Canadians have to earn their freedom. It's not given to them. It's not guaranteed to them because they were born in Canada. It's not guaranteed in the Constitution. It's not guaranteed in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. You have to earn it. like you were a person who committed a crime and now you're trying to get parole. You know, you're doing your best to try to please the overlords so that they will think that you've changed your ways and now you can earn your freedom. A limited freedom, grant you, because Stephen Guilbeault is going to want to control all of the internet, and everybody else in the Liberal Party is going to want to decide what you can and cannot say. I mean, we can look at the example of the CBC, a taxpayer-funded organization that apparently has so little money that it needs bailouts, but it has enough money to pay somebody to run around looking at all kinds of different websites and contacting people. That's the kind of freedom that you get when you're on the far left. You have to earn it. It's not yours by right. It's not yours by birth. You have to earn it. See, sometimes these politicians, they forget that people are listening, and they talk and they say things that they shouldn't be saying. They say things, they let slip the way they truly feel when nobody's around, right? When the microphones are turned off and they're talking amongst people that are like-minded. Earn your freedom, he said. No. I reject your contention, Prime Minister Carney. I reject it wholeheartedly with every fiber of my being. I'm going to wrap here. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next time.